Testing. Ooh, it's good. I think it works. Welcome to the Paideia group on June 25th, 2023. Okay. That happened this morning too. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Paideia group this evening. And is it being live streamed? Yep. Okay. Welcome to the live stream, people. My name is Joanne Gray, and we'll open with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to be together, to learn from each other, to interact with each other. And we pray that you'll guide us so that our interactions might glorify your name and your character, which is love and understanding and wisdom and insight. And we pray for an increase in all those things as we meet with each other and you this evening. We pray this all for Jesus' sake, who is our Savior and Redeemer. Amen.
All right, I get to go first. There is free lemonade and, or rather, lemonade iced tea mixed together with lots of ice and stuff back there. So please grab one at any point. And something that Matthew said last time we met, and he gave his presentation about metaphysics and ontology, and we were talking about what is the nature of reality. And something that you said, Matt, was you can't have objective moral rules without God. Is that a fair way to say it? Yeah. What mic should we use to have you guys talk? Somebody grab this. We just need to, whoops. Oh, good, it's long enough, all right. If it's not long enough to go everywhere, just let me, yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind. So, yeah, I kind of want to, just define objective versus subjective morality. What are we even talking about when we talk about morality? It's very simple. What is right and wrong? So, yeah. So what is right and what is wrong? Has anyone ever said, hey, that's not right? That's, talking about not just like a math question, something factual in that sense, but rather human behavior, right? I think we've all commented on human behavior and said that's right or that's wrong. So, but who gets to decide what is right and wrong, right? And I think from a Christian perspective, it's always been, and you'll find somebody like William Lane Craig, who has everybody heard of him? He's he would call himself a philosopher, but he's a Christian apologist type person who tries to defend the Christian faith. And he would say, you have to believe in God, because without God, there are no objective moral rules or moral values, I think is the way he puts it. So what does he mean by objective? It means it's outside of us. It's not according to one person or a group of persons. It applies to everybody. Where a subjective morality would be, you consider it wrong, but maybe another person considers it right. And because it's just your opinion, you can't be certain. There's no way of enforcing that other than with the use of force. Like people certainly try to force other people into their view of things. That's been historically the case, and even today in some places, even in our own country. You could disagree with a law, but who cares what you think? The government's going to have its say because it has the power of force behind it, right? But objective moral rules are things that we all will agree upon. And I think inherent in it is that very fact that they, by their very nature, are things that we all agree on. We'll get to that. But yeah, Joanne?
So by objective, you mean it's kind of provable?
Yes, it's provable. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's provable. It's not just somebody's opinion. And I like to liken this unto health, or lots of areas of knowledge and areas in which we're talking about facts and not just opinions. Now, in health or in science or whatever, there's lots of opinions, but there's indisputable facts as well. If you stop eating, you will starve yourself. That's an indisputable fact. So if you value life, if you value living, you have to eat. You have to drink water. You have to do certain things in order to live. And if you don't do those things, then you won't live. So that's an example of, it's objective. It's not just your opinion. It's applicable to everybody, all human beings. Now, is that sort of where you're coming from, or is there, how would you, Matthew, how would you define objective morality being connected to God in some way? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
No, I guess I would say that when we talk about objective morality,
is that on? Just want to make sure it's on. Yeah. Turn it up.
so even if
Oh, that's. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to figure out which one it is.
oh, I have to press the button.
But I think it's still.
Hello?
It's still not turned up. Hey, keep talking to it.
Hello? Hello? Oh, hello? 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 There we have something. Well, it's a little bit distracting when you're back there with the conversation.
I'll be right back.
You and me.
But rather than there being dead air, right?
Do you want to see something? I'll just wait till you come here. I guess I'll just talk about it. Yeah. I guess the question is, okay, how would I define objective morality? And I think the easiest way that I would define it is have you imagine a situation where people don't exist. So if nobody existed, would murder still be wrong? Okay. I would say yes, it is, because it's not grounded in people's existence. It's grounded in God's existence, right? So when we make moral claims, they are independent of our psychology or our sociology or our culture, right? When we say that murder is wrong, we're saying something different from I don't like murder, or society doesn't like murder, or our culture frowns on murder.
Is that microphone on?
Can you hear? It sounds like it's kind of on. It's weird. Is the priority of using this thing just
For the live stream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay, there we go.
I think it has to be closer.
Yeah. Yeah, say that, just reiterate your last point, because I think that sums it.
I guess when I talk about, or when most Christians talk about objective morality, it's always independent of our
Right.
psychology, our sociology, and our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So murder is still wrong, regardless whether or not I think it's right or wrong.
Right.
Regardless whether or not society thinks it's right or wrong, or culture thinks it's right or wrong. Right?
Perfect. That's great. Okay, so, Chris.
So I guess my question would be, like, why does it need to be? My question is, why does it need to be independent of society? So like an example that I can think of would be, imagine that all of everyone gets wiped out of existence except for like a cannibal tribe, except for one person who's not in the cannibal tribe, and they think that murder is wrong, but the cannibal tribe thinks that murder is good,
Right.
So wouldn't that then make it so that the claim that murder is is wrong for that one person would not be objective, because that person's now living with the cannibal tribe, right? That thinks murder is okay. So how is this? How is it independent from society? I guess what I'm saying.
So,
Well, eventually we'll have everybody mic'd up.
okay, so just, let me kind of reiterate. So we have a hypothetical society where there's cannibalism, and they all think it's good, right? Okay, so I would still say that cannibalism is wrong.
Yeah, but you're gonna say that, but the cannibal tribe thinks
Right.
it's wrong.
Okay, so the difference is the difference is that okay, I don't believe in this kind of moral relativism,
Yeah.
right?
So maybe I can make this point, because if just because something is objective and true regardless of whether or not people believe in it, doesn't mean people are going to believe in it. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So now the issue is, okay, does morality exist in the kind of way that I think it exists? Right? This kind of an absolute sense, independent of society. I think it exists. But the thing is, you can't look around. You can't point to moral facts like we can point to facts around the world, right? Or what we see around the world. Like, we can't point to a moral fact like we can point to any other kind of fact. Like, there's a speaker right in front of me, right? So
Right.
our methods of moral inquiry needs to be different from scientific inquiry.
Right. They're founded in concepts. So they are conceptual in its nature, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a physical reality manifestation. Of course it does, because we're talking about being killed, being murdered, right? That's the easiest one to talk about, because it's the one that I hope we would all actually, baked into the very idea of murder, is the victim doesn't want to be murdered. So that is the objective thing that makes it apply to everybody, because that's the definition of it.
Yeah. Okay. So my understanding of your talk was that you're going to provide sort of an atheistic system of morality. Now, are you going to be doing that, or are we just
Yep.
going to?
No, I'll do
So
it.
you're going to continue.
Yeah, I'm going to continue.
All
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah, okay.
okay.
All right. I'll continue. So, weirdly enough, I happen to think you don't need God to get to objective moral rules. Now, I'm happy to learn more about how maybe you do. Like, Chris and I were just talking about this. I would think you would need God to be motivated to keep moral rules. You would need God to have a sense that there is going to be justice eventually, that people who follow moral rules are going to be rewarded, and people who don't follow moral rules are going to be punished. That's why I think you would need a God or some sort of theological system. But you don't need God or a reference to the supernatural to come up with objective moral rules. Now, to be really clear, we're not talking about opinions. We're talking, so what's an example of something is just an opinion? Sorry to pick on you, Chris, but I was walking over and Chris came in, and what kind of music were you blasting in your car there?
I don't know, it was on the radio.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever it was, it's not my cup of tea, but that's just my opinion, right? I would prefer rock music. I listen to rock music, right? But I'm going to guess Joanne probably would not enjoy the kind of music I listen to. But none of us are right and none of us are wrong about these things. This is not morality. These are preferences. These are just subjective preferences about stuff. So that, we'll clear that out of the way. We're not talking about that. And I would say, like, in a good society, in a free society, people should be able to do whatever they want when it comes to their subjective preferences, as long as they're not forcing it upon others. Do what you want, right? But then there are things that include another person against their will, right? And interestingly enough, it's all of the common moral rules that we teach our children, that we try to have implemented in society, which is don't murder, don't steal, don't assault, don't rape. These are all variations of the same principle, which is something is being done by an actor, by a person, acting upon another person against their will, without their consent. And so that is, like, if you think of moral rules being, if you put it this way, moral rule has to be, if you're going to have a moral rule, it has to apply to everyone, at all times, in every place, in all circumstances. That's what an objective moral rule would be. Is that right? Does anybody disagree with that?
I think so.
I'll say it again. An objective moral rule is a rule that applies, like a behavioral rule that applies to every single person in all circumstances, every place, throughout all time, no matter what. And yeah, John.
Yeah, so I think maybe one of the issues with defining it like that would be the context non-specificity. So,
Yeah.
for example, if we take murder, so to speak, unless we say define murder as separate from killing, because killing can occur in both murder and, say,
That's
like
right.
self-defense.
Hmm. Exactly.
Well, murder is separate. Like murder is killing somebody without a good reason.
Right. It's baked into the
Murder.
the idea of murder itself is the victim does not consent. Because I think the last time I spoke about ethics was I gave this example. You couldn't know if an act of cutting somebody, of a person cutting somebody else, is right or wrong, is morally right or wrong, because that could be surgery. And the person being cut has fully consented to it. And in fact, it's going to help them. So the act of, that's not an assault because they want it to be happening.
Okay. Would you say then that, say you kill someone in self-defense, for example, is that person consenting to their?
No, but yeah, the issue with that is the person the person that you're killing in self-defense, they were the ones who initiated the act of unwanted force, and so it's hard to say exactly what it is that makes that right. Do you have an idea?
I think for the purposes of this discussion, like we don't need to talk about specific cases of when is something murder or when it's killing.
Right.
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 We're just
Yes.
using an example of murder as an example where killing somebody is unjustified.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
I don't think it's necessary to talk about the specific, because the issue is whether or not objective.
Yeah, we can test it afterwards with stuff like that, but let's just try to establish the theory itself. So again, the theory is that you can know what objective moral rules are because there are certain things that everybody would agree to. Everybody agrees that a person would not. The victim in the situation where a person is being murdered, the victim does not want to be murdered. That's something that is indisputable. It's a fact. It's baked into the definition. If they don't want to be killed, then that is murder. So that can actually be applied. The prohibition of murder, do not murder, is something that everybody can keep. There's nothing subjective about it. There's nothing like it's simply a recognition that people do not want to be murdered. And so I don't know if I'm explaining this as well. The way I see the Paideia group, just by the way, I was thinking about this today, is, I really love stand-up comedy. Does anybody like stand-up comedy? Well, no, I have no jokes, but the way that they work out their material is by going up and just trying to work it out. So that's kind of how I feel like I'm trying to work stuff out and see what works and what doesn't work. Let's check my notes and just see. So, everyone has an opinion on what is right behavior, what is wrong behavior. However, that is subjective. So, but that doesn't mean there aren't objective rules. So, morality is about behavior. Prescription's about behavior. But, as I said, a moral prescription has to apply to everyone at all times and in every place. Otherwise, it's subjective. So what we're talking about are things that can apply to everyone at all times, in every place, in all circumstances.
Which would be something like the greatest good for the greatest number.
Well, that to me allows for the injustice of the people who aren't included in the greatest number. What about if you're not in the greatest number?
Still a step ahead.
So I would say that what you just said, the greatest good for the greatest number, is almost what I'm talking about. It's taking it for one step further and saying the greatest good for everyone. And what are those things that are the greatest good for everyone? Not murdering, because, hey, we're all doing it right now, right? We're all not assaulting people. We're all not raping. We're all not stealing from each other. It's the state of non-aggression, right? And so this is why libertarians will talk about the non-aggression principle, because it's a state of peace. Moral rules only are necessary when there's conflict, right? When there's conflict, that's why you need some sort of prescription to solve that and get back to the state of peace. Any thought? Well, and so to go what you just said, Dave, is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's great after you've established the foundation of these objective moral rules. if you can then say we're not killing each other, we're not murdering each other, we're not stealing from each other, and then how can we get the greatest life out of society as possible, as long as you don't violate those foundational moral rules. So a murderer oh, John, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify. The foundation for objective morality in a secular society would be greatest good for everyone?
For each individual.
Okay.
Yes, it is an individualistic way of looking at things. In other words, we're talking about every individual sovereign. So just like, go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Okay, so but you're saying that the people who agree with this idea, the greatest good, utilitarianism, like they're basing it on a particular society.
No. What I'm not saying that this is a utilitarian way of looking at it. That comes after, if you want. If you want to have utilitarianism that is coming up with theories or prescriptions that bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people, that's fine. Do what you want in a free society, but without violating these foundational rules.
Yeah, so I think it actually is like pretty similar to the more modern interpretations of utilitarianism.
Okay.
That basically say, okay, not just the greatest good for the greatest number, but the least suffering principle, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That says, okay, as you said, we're not going to sacrifice the interests of small groups.
Right. Yeah. So a person can, I think, kind of what you're getting at with this cultural thing. You can have a culture like a cannibalistic tribe that doesn't think there's anything wrong with murder, taking the life of another against their will, but that doesn't make it right according to these principles, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I do want to make a statement, though. I don't think utilitarianism would be society specific. So, for example, in Chris's case, there was that one guy who was like, "Oh, like,
Yeah.
don't eat me, please."
Right. Right.
If they that guy, that would be a violation of utilitarian principles.
Right. Right. Matthew?
Oh, okay, I'm still struggling to understand how what grounding a secular society would have to, or how a secular society would justify
Right.
this. Like that's what I'm trying
Fair
to
enough.
understand.
Fair enough. I'm trying to work it out. So, and I'm again just trying to work it out in front of people, so that it's tough. But I think it comes down to this: if anybody tries to propose any kind of moral prescription, what they're saying is that there's some objective standard that we're referring to. If somebody says, "Hey, what you're doing is wrong," it's like, according to what? According to whom? Right? Is that basically what we're getting at? Like, according to what? Well, what I'm saying is that these basic moral rules that we're all familiar with is according to logic. Just according to logic itself, these are the rules that meet the criteria of rules that can be applied in every circumstances to every person throughout time, in every place. Like that's just the logical consistency of them.
So I'll challenge you on that. So there's a difference between like the facts,
Yeah.
whether or not something is factually right or wrong,
Right.
and then the logic, which is the kind of inferences
Yes.
you're making based on the facts.
Yeah.
So the question is, okay, so how could a society actually establish normative facts,
Right.
right? So not empirical facts like science, we're
Right.
talking about normative facts,
Right.
right? So regardless of what the logic is, how can we establish normative facts whatsoever?
Right. Well, but here's okay. So I think that's a good point. And if I may try to reiterate, tell me if I got what you're saying right. How do you implement these moral rules? Is that basically
Well,
it?
it's not the implementation, is where do we ground them? Like,
Yeah. Right.
where are they grounded in?
Right. Okay. So from a historical perspective, let's just use the United States as like they would say you have a right to life and liberty, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They rooted it in God. More modern libertarians who agree with that, but who are perhaps atheists, would say, well, God is just a metaphor for the what would you say? Like, you can root it in the very fact that everybody is an individual, right? You can make up groups, but that doesn't erase individuals. So if you say every individual has the right to life and to liberty, you root it in the fact that we're all individuals. Nobody is not an individual, right?
So you pointed as two different people, the people who generate or articulated sort of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, that's right. That's
right.
Because
Because it explicitly references God.
yeah.
And even I think the UN policies, like, okay, let's not talk about that. But like, I still there's another group of people say, oh, God is just a metaphor of everybody else. Okay, but
Yeah.
so what are they rooted in? What is it? What are they grounding it in? Like, who is the individual that we're supposed to ground their rights and freedoms in?
Right.
Or is it an arbitrary decision made on the society?
Well, I don't know if it's arbitrary insofar as we're talking about moral rules. The very concept grounds it. Like, is that what you're gonna say, John?
Yeah, basically. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, well, it's not grounded in like an individual. It's grounded in the concept that this is generally good for everyone.
Yeah, or rather, not just generally good, but by their definitions, these are the things that are good for everybody.
It comes down to, how would you like it if somebody did that to you?
Yeah, that's why that resonates with us, because
Do you
what we're
want to-
talking about is the state of not having things done to you that you don't want done to you. And it turns out all of our basic moral rules fit that criteria.
Okay, so when we're talking about grounding,
Yeah.
okay, we got to be more specific.
Yeah,
what that means,
please.
Okay?
I'm learning
Yeah,
here, by the way.
anybody
Yeah.
can generate some concepts, like say utilitarianism, or
Yeah.
anybody can articulate some list of that we all kind of agree on.
That's right, yeah.
So anybody can just generate a concept, but does that concept have any bearing on reality? So when we talk about
Right.
grounded, we're talking about
Right.
grounded in reality,
Right.
right?
Right.
So yeah, we can come up with a moral claim. We can all be atheists. We can establish a moral maxim or whatever, a concept,
Yep.
and then we just follow it through to its logical conclusion.
Right.
All right. So does that concept have any bearing on reality? Like, does that concept reflect a reality?
Outside of humanity? No.
Okay.
But that's the same as scientific knowledge, health knowledge. We're talking about within the realm of being a human being, right?
Right. Okay. But even in science, though, if humanity's not there, we would still think that the science would still,
Well,
like, the conclusions of science would still be correct, even if we were all wiped out.
Yeah.
The truth is still out.
yeah, but the logic that the only moral rules that meet the criteria of all people at all times in every place would still stand even if we were all wiped out.
Yeah.
So same with morality, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so it's not just a concept that people generate; it's these concepts that reflect reality.
Right. I think I know where you're going.
Now the question is, okay, how can if you're an atheist, how can you justify this? This ground, like, how can you justify the idea that it can be grounded in reality?
I have an answer to that, but John, what do you?
Yeah, I want to say that it's kind of a bit of a, like, I don't really think it's a great comparison to compare scientific truths to moral truths in terms of, oh, if we remove human activity, those scientific truths are still valid.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are truths mostly independent of humans, like as opposed, like, excluding like human biology, for example, but like the fact that gravity exists despite humans.
Right.
Whereas all of our moral claims and like moral activities, like for example, the statement "murder is wrong" wouldn't actually exist. There would be no such thing as murder if humans didn't exist.
Right. It is a human-centered area of knowledge.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't see the problem with grounding this in human activity.
Yeah.
So grounding it in sort of the collective will of the society. Is that
No.
okay? So it's not.
It's
so
grounded in a recognition of the logic of it. And a person is free to not recognize logic. Plenty of people don't. Chris?
So I don't see why there needs to be some. So I don't see why there needs to be some, like, I don't understand the foundation that you're pointing to, Matt. Like what you mean by a foundation that's needed. So like when we say murder's wrong, the reason why we know murder's wrong is because if someone tried to kill us, we would instantly know it. And Matt's trying to say that there's some foundation or some intelligibility to that understanding, but really you could just say it's survival instincts, like really basic, just survival instincts of, holy crap, my body is telling me this is wrong, right? Because I want to survive. So in that sense, like we all have that intuitive understanding,
Right.
right? There doesn't need to be some foundation that we ground that in. That can really just be
Right.
again, just like basic bodily instincts that we have based on evolution.
Hopefully the mic will reach. Oh, that's good.
I'm just confused because I feel like if we're talking about morality, I don't really understand how we can talk about morality outside of, like, if we existed, because
Yeah.
then why would it matter?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
there's no morals to matter.
Right.
So that's just
The-
I'm confused.
The very topic is dependent upon, like, it only came about when human beings came about. Like, before human beings, before we were created or evolved or whatever, there was no such thing as morality because it only is a concept that makes sense within our existence. Now, to use the word grounding, are you talking about justification? Like, that is to say, how do you justify it? Yeah.
That's a part of it. I would like to respond to Chris's response.
Sure.
Because yeah, okay, I'll just respond to Chris. Okay, so Chris is saying, essentially asking, okay, so why do we need to add this transcendental sort of perspective? Like, does it contribute to anything? Sorry, what was your name again, too? Rebecca. Yeah, I thought it was Rebecca or something like that.
Not Rachel.
Not Rachel. Okay. Yeah. So, how do I? So okay. So first of all, I'll try to respond to Chris. So there's a distinction in our moral language, okay, between descriptions, okay. If a lion is, or if John starts to strangle me, ow, it's gonna hurt me. All right. So you can describe reality in that way, but then you got to jump between the how you describe reality, what is, to what ought to be.
Right.
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 And this is the jump.
The is ought.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is ought problem. Right.
Yeah.
This ought has to be grounded in something.
Well, yeah. So it's not just one person's individual experience. To comment on that, right? That would be your subjective preference to not want to be murdered. But it's interesting, though, that is something that everybody is going to have the same preference.
So okay.
It's universal.
So now allow me to try to get a little bit more specific. Okay. So the biggest problem I have. So obviously atheists could do right, and in many circumstances they do, and there's biblical reasons why. Because God reveals Himself to the atheists and the theists alike, right?
Yeah.
But the challenge I have when atheists make moral claims is that they say, okay, morality exists, murder is wrong, yada yada yada, but it's rooted in preferences, for example, or whether it's individual preferences or societal preferences, is rooted in some kind of psychology.
Right.
Right. And yeah, I get you could root it in that, but the challenge I have is that the way that we make moral claims, okay, when we say, let me try to rephrase it. If an atheist wants to say murder is wrong, and then I ask him, okay, well, how is it actually wrong? Then you say, oh, well, because my preference or society's preference or what have you. Then my question is, why say moral is wrong? Why not just say I don't like morality or I
Murder.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not just say I don't like murder? Why say murder is wrong when you can just say, which is far more accurate, I don't like murder,
Right.
or our society doesn't like murder. So there seems to be a contradiction between the way that atheists use moral language,
Yes.
okay, and what they actually mean, right? So this is related to semantics and in language. Pragmatics is the study of how we use language.
Right.
So semantics is what's the meaning of language. Pragmatics is how do we use language. So if I'm a theist and I'm listening to this, I always think, okay, every time you're making moral claims, murder is wrong, or this is wrong, this is
Yeah.
wrong. The language, it's articulated in such a way where
Yes.
you're using it to make objective moral claims.
Yeah.
You don't mean, when you say that murder is wrong, it's not like saying, I don't really like a Chardonnay.
Right.
Right?
It's
difference
not the same.
between- Yeah, you know,
But that's
no-
kind of my point,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that they're
so-
not the same thing.
well,
And
let me say it one more
yeah.
time. Yeah. An expression of preference, like I don't like Chardonnay,
yes,
versus a moral utterance,
Yes.
murder is wrong.
Right.
They mean something different, and we use the language in a different way,
right.
right?
John?
So I think that's a good point, except what I would say is that in the case of murder, I think it's very clear from Dan's perspective that this isn't grounded in psychology, and it's grounded in basically a modification of utilitarianism, as far as I understand it.
As long as we're talking about applying to every person.
So
Yeah.
if it's not grounded in individual psychology, then maybe a collective psychology, like
Well,
or a cultural psychology.
as much as no, not because people are free to deny morality, moral rules.
So I still understand, like, if it's not grounded in the individual or in the culture or in the society, then what is it grounded in?
It's grounded. It's grounded in logic, which I get why from a theist perspective that doesn't make any sense. It's like, where did that logic come from?
Well, it's not grounded in logic because moral facts are moral facts. The moral facts are separate from the logic, which is the reasoning.
Well, I don't see how you can separate them.
Well, they are separate. Like a fact is different from the arguments is like a syllogism.
Yes, right?
You follow the inference. It's
Right.
like an equation.
Right,
So the equation, but then there's the contents that you plug in for the equation.
right.
When we talk about logic, we're talking about the inference.
But we're
the
providing
structure of the
we're providing the motivation to adhere to the logic at the very beginning when we're saying we are looking for moral rules that apply to everybody.
Yeah, okay, all right. So how do we ground? Okay, so there's the logic, and then
Yeah.
there's the content.
Yeah.
Some principle you want to establish.
Yeah.
How is that principle established, I guess, metaphysically, like in reality?
Only insofar as individuals agree to it.
Okay, so it is dependent on the individual.
But it's not subjective. It's not, again, this is why I started, I'll get to you, John. This is why I started with the idea of health. It's an objective fact that if you starve yourself, you're going to die. And if you value living, then you have to eat. Those aren't, like, you have a choice. You can subscribe to the truth of it or not. Like, you can embrace the truth of it or not. But it doesn't, like, you not embracing that truth doesn't make the thing itself not true. That if you starve yourself, you're going to die. That's a truth.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Murder is morally wrong, whether or not a person agrees with that or not. It's
So I agree with that part,
yeah.
but I don't know how you can agree with that as someone who's secular.
Because if we're talking about moral rules, we're talking about things that apply to everybody at all times and in all places. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about more objective moral rules.
So it sounds like
So
we just
there are
define it as such, and we just all agree with it.
100%. But I did the same thing with if you value living. A person cannot value living and just starve themselves to death, right? Or kill themselves. But if you do value moral rules, then you have to recognize there are some moral rules that apply to everybody in all places. Sorry, John.
Yeah, so I think like in general, maybe like some bit of logic that might help us get to why murder is wrong. Is that usually individuals have some sort of thing to offer to a society, or maybe, for example, some other people will retaliate on behalf of their death. I mean, all kinds of consequences. Things.
Right.
So I guess the logic that you follow is that there are consequences to these to murder,
Yeah.
and that those consequences are bad, and that's basically like independent of if everyone in your society but you thinks that you should be dead, for example, but I don't know, maybe your
Or I can give you, I'm fascinated with World War II. I just watch YouTube videos about it all the time. How did the Nazi regime end? With utter destruction, right? Berlin was just completely destroyed. Hitler killed himself. The rest got captured or whatever, right? So you can have a society that ignores moral rules, like don't murder people, like the Nazis did. But hey, we have now really great historical examples that the societies that don't adhere to more basic moral rules end up in destruction. So that's a motivating factor to it, why you would want to keep these rules.
Yeah, well, I do want to say, though, because you could probably, take a step further and say, well, what if the Nazis didn't, what if they, won, they took over the world? Well, now they have a very big economic hole to fill,
right?
For example.
Yeah. It would have just been destruction on a mass. Well, that's the Soviet Union is an example of not adhering to moral rules, which is a respect for individuals and their property, and look how it ended, right? In shambles.
Right, but I'm still struggling to understand how, metaphysically, these concepts are grounded, in reality, right? Because we as society, we can think about a concept and just obey it, follow it through to its logic. We could do that.
That's right.
And even if it leads to good things, it's still arbitrary. It's still,
Well,
it's still, because we can imagine scenarios where doing the wrong thing could lead to good consequences, right? We can keep coming up with these hypotheticals, right?
Well, but the thing is, doing the wrong thing, let's say, I try not to bring up my usuals, but if you have a society that constantly prints money, which is a form of fraud, because you're basically allowing the government to have as much money and it has no value underneath it to support it. That for in the moment makes things good. That's the kind of society we live in right now. Things are great. It can't last forever, because embedded within these actions that violate these moral rules are going to be a violation of somebody's consent. Somewhere along the line, somebody's going to get screwed over if you don't keep these moral rules.
Okay, but who are other people that we should care about them? Right. So
good point.
The thing is, and what you're referring to, this idea, it's like Kantian, it's like deontological ethics, right?
Yeah, it is in a way.
If everybody does this, it's going to be devastating for everybody.
Yeah.
And but Kant himself is religious, he's Christian. Even
Right.
though he's kind of secular, but he's also still Christian. He believes in God.
Right.
And it only treating people as an end in themselves
Yeah.
rather than a means to an end. It's just it's impossible for me to conceive of that outside of a religious worldview.
But I would say it matters what a person believes. So because because we believe in God, I think it. And by the way, I'm providing you a secular perspective, but I think it actually makes more sense that there's some creator God who within himself, or he is the creator of logic, the creator of intelligibility. He's the one who makes these things make sense and made our existence be what it is. So it only makes sense that these moral rules are reflecting that perfect logic that exists in him.
Well, I agree with that.
But that's because we believe in God.
Exactly.
So what I'm saying is a person who doesn't believe in God might not have as much motivation to keep moral rules, which is why we have a society with punishments, and you get arrested and you get punished. So there are other motivating factors for atheists as to why to keep moral rules. It's not quite as lofty or abstract, however you want to put it, esoteric as a theist's reasons to keep these rules. Because we're saying there's something transcending us from which we get these basic moral rules from. Which is awesome. Well, that's pretty amazing. If that's true, then that confirms that this is the right, like it's not just, again, it's not just a matter of opinion. It's baked into the concepts themselves is the logic of everybody cannot murder, everybody cannot steal. And so therefore, those are the things that we should be doing or should not be doing. We should all not be doing those things. And we can have a peaceful society as a result. And history bears that out. The more there's a respect for individuals and property rights, the more successful, the more prosperous and peaceful that country is. I think, at least as far as I can tell. This is why the United States has got its problems, but it's the most, the richest country in the history of the world, so to speak. Because it put right into its Declaration of Independence that we're going to respect individuals' right to life and to liberty and to pursuit of happiness, and they should have said property as well, but hey, I'm not going to critique Thomas Jefferson. So anyway, any thoughts, questions? Yeah, Rebecca.
So just so I'm clear, so we're ending on, from an atheist perspective, that the grounding of morality is logic.
Yes,
And
I
then,
think
so our debate here a little bit is that if you're religious, it can't be logic because you have the hierarchy of, and then if you're atheist, that logic is just enough. I'm just confused by that.
I would say if you're a theist, it's still logic, but you're rooting that, in my understanding, you're rooting that in God. You're rooting that in something that actually transcends humanity. So or another way to put it is, it helps to explain why logic exists, because there's some logic maker, if you will, right? But the thing is, you can't prove that to an atheist, right? Like, because all we have is our experience.
I just want to clarify, and because I feel like maybe it's not really clear. Like, there's a distinction between logic and fact.
Yeah, maybe I don't understand that.
So logic is the reason.
You want to get Dave? Can you take the mic?
So logic is the reasoning. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how an argument unfolds.
Yeah.
And a syllogism, if A then B, A therefore B, right? That we can use the letters
Mm-hmm.
to symbolize things.
Yep.
Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, right?
Right,
So we can
it
fill
follows.
in the logic with content. Socrates, mortal, right? So logic is
Yeah.
the equations,
Right.
right? How these sequences follow each other. But then you got to fill in these equations with the concepts.
Right. And I have the concept.
idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you do have a concept.
Yeah.
So the question I've been asking is from an atheist view, where do we get this concept? And then the only real response I heard from people was that either it's in the individual or in society or maybe some culture, right? So which means it's all kind of relativistic,
Well,
right?
w-
It all
again,
depends on society. So if society thinks something different, okay, then what's good is different.
so like the topic is objective versus subjective. I don't think anybody disagrees that. I don't think anybody would say there aren't subjective moral rules, meaning individuals or societies can come up with all kinds of rules. We do it all. We have hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah. So the question is, if you're an atheist, how can you ground objective moral rules?
Because the definition of the word objective is, in this context, is it applies to everybody at all times, at all places.
Okay, but how do we ground that in reality? Like, okay, so we create a concept that's just out there.
Yes.
But what is it grounded in? It's grounded in what people think, right?
Yes.
So then if people thought differently, then the morality would be different.
That's correct, but they would be wrong.
Okay, well then, like, how would you say that?
But this is what I'm saying, that there are such things as right and wrong. There is being logical or illogical. You can deny. Lots of people deny health-related things that are objectively true. People do it all the time.
Right.
But that doesn't make the objective health facts wrong or not objective.
So I understand from a theistic perspective how morality can be grounded in something.
Yeah.
It's grounded in the transcendent, right? But so the question is, if you're not a theist, then you're grounding it in individual preference.
It's still transcendent. It's just calling it by a different name.
If you're secular, you wouldn't believe in the transcendent.
No, I think if you're secular, you have to believe in the transcendent insofar as we're coming into this world and reality is above us. Like,
but then
reality doesn't exist because of us. We exist because of reality.
Yeah, but they wouldn't call themselves they wouldn't say, "Oh, I believe in the transcendent."
Well, transcendent beyond human beings, just not beyond reality. Like we're again, if you say here's a concept, and you agree that there are logical deductions you can make from that, like what I've been trying to say, I mean, that does not require human beings for that to be true.
Yeah.
It requires human beings for us to grasp it, for us to make sense of it, but it's just true regardless.
So yeah, that makes sense in a religious perspective, but it doesn't make sense in an atheist or a secular perspective.
Well, I think that's why some people are theists and some people are atheists. Is some people are fine with the taking it so far. Isn't this not true, John? Like, some people are fine to take it so far and say, that is what it is. I don't need a reason in addition to that. Like, these, you can recognize.
So in other words, you're applying like Occam's razor. You're saying we still believe this.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think like Occam's razor is like. I don't know. I think it's a bad tool to use personally.
Well, because I don't think that's what that's. I'm blanking on what that is again. It's the simplest solution is probably the right one.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Yeah. No, but okay. In a sense, that is what we're doing because.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, it sounds like that.
It's saying we don't know if there is a God, so therefore, but we do know that human beings exist, and we do know that the definition of objective applies to everybody. So how can we derive moral rules from that?
Chris?
But it's Chris's turn now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I want to say this, but I don't believe in. I don't think that people know how to make prescriptive claims, oughts or shoulds about things. I don't think people know how to do that. And because people don't know how to do that, I feel like it's pointless to talk about prescriptive claims rather than just descriptive claims. So going back to the example that I used about how does an atheist know that murder is wrong? Well,
Yeah.
they look toward like the fact that they feel bad about murder being wrong, and then they try to explain that using like evolutionary biology, saying like, oh, like I have like my genes want to survive and preserve
Yeah.
themselves, so like therefore like I don't want to die.
Right.
So, but when we make prescriptive claims like about like what should we be doing, or what, like I don't think people know how to do that. So
But people do that all the time. What I mean.
do that all the time, but I don't think that that makes them right about what they're doing.
Well, sometimes it's a very subjective thing. I would say most times people say you should do this or you should not do that. It's super subjective. It's like, hey, you're just talking about maybe something that works for you. It's not something that can be applied to everybody. But there are certain things that you can say, you shouldn't murder people. And that's something that is objective. Why? Because we're talking about something that can be applied to every person. Every person cannot murder. And in fact, you recognize that if you're going to have a prescription of morality, like a moral prescription, it has to be something that it can apply to everybody.
But the theory or the rule that we're using there doesn't, as John mentioned in first when he said that it doesn't apply to all contexts or scenarios, right? So like
But this is why I keep on using the word murder, because murder has within it the victim not wanting to be killed.
Another way to say it's wrong to torture children for fun. It's an objective.
Well, It's wrong to torture anyone because torture includes having a victim not agreeing to the situation. So you could never say that torture for.
I think it's still wrong even if I agree to it.
Yeah, no, but well, okay, but get this, you can't make torture or assaulting people a universal moral prescription. Why? Because baked into the idea is that somebody's going to be the victim. And so now that person is not acting out the so-called moral prescription of assaulting is good.
That's what I mean. So I don't think that, like, I think that actions are what's most important.
Okay, fair enough.
So, like, I don't understand. So why do we need to talk about theory and rules when that's not how the actions get changed and how they are impacted and affected?
It's like anything else. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to respond. I think Chris is actually representing. I think Chris, what he's saying is actually accurately reflecting what a good atheist would say about morality. Is that in a certain respect, our moral claims. If you're an atheist, if you want to go down that route, it seems like our moral claims, this prescriptive claims, are in a sense illusory. Like they don't really matter. Right? And is that kind of yeah. So and the thing is, and atheists start using this kind of argument for a lot of different things, right? Even truth with a capital T. They say, oh well, we don't really have access to that. All we have is scientific theories, and we can modify these theories. So we never actually know when we found the truth, right? But the challenge I have with that worldview is that, or that way of approaching these things, is that it makes life completely unlivable. It contradicts our existential experience.
That's right.
Right? And so in this, to me, like as a Christian, I don't know why somebody would want to live in an as-if lifestyle, because that's what atheism amounts to. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in these things, but I'm going to live as if they're true. I'm going to live. I don't really think murder is wrong, but I'm going to live as if they are. And this is the issue, I think, with atheism in general, is that, yeah, they can maintain all these things. Morality doesn't exist. Truth doesn't exist. But I'm going to live as if they do.
Right.
So there's a discrepancy between what they're saying and their reality, their behavior, the way they talk.
Right.
Right? Like, it's as if they're kind of, like, lying to themselves all the time.
I think I agree with that insofar as truth does exist. Truth exists because truth are statements about reality that accurately correspond to reality.
They would say that we don't know if we actually know what reality is.
Okay, but then we're out into anything could be true, or anything could be our this could be a simulation. This could be whatever. But insofar as we have maybe this is what you were getting at. Insofar as we have a human experience, we can make moral rules from our experience. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Chris? Or am I still, or what you're saying is,
What I'm saying is that, like,
why talk about prescriptions?
no, like, I think that, to me, morality is about, like, how we act, like, how is important, because that's the way in which we, the very, I guess, mode in which we exist, how Rebecca was explaining it, like, that, it's all coming from, like, the way in which we act, like, and
So you said how as opposed to why.
It's getting at what I think Matt was right in saying that, like, I think that what's important is, like, descriptive. It's about, like, describing how something is, like, for example, like, describing how it is that, like, why is it that murder is wrong for me? It's because it's how it makes me feel. Like, I don't like to make people, like, I don't want to make people feel like hurt, I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to,
Right.
And, like, Matt can say there's some foundation to that in, like, there's this beauty and there's this like, good, and there's transcendent good. I don't think there's a transcendent value there. I think it's literally just, like, again, you could literally just explain it using evolutionary, like, biology, right?
Right.
So, like, in that sense, like, I don't see why there needs to be a transcendent value that's there.
I suppose, but are you the type of person who would look at a tragedy like a child being murdered, or let's just pile on the injustices there, and say that shouldn't, like how would you respond to that? Wouldn't we all say that was morally wrong? They shouldn't have done that.
And common sense tells you that.
No, but I mean, but based upon what? Like, why should we say that's wrong?
Because it doesn't fit within essentially the kind of vision that God has for creation.
Right.
Like that's the religious response.
So it's possible that, and I agree with that. So it's possible that what I'm describing is like the nuts and bolts of it, and you're describing where it came from and why it exists. Is that fair? Like, I'm just describing, like the you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just kind of want to like, would you agree, Chris, though, that like your view, it may be right. You could be right, but in that case, you're living an as-if lifestyle. You believe these things. Only description matters, and you know how you feel. But the way you talk, the way you behave, was obviously. You are making prescriptions about the world, right?
Like lots of them, but like how should in
Yeah.
your day-to-day life. Like if you look at, you know, the war in Ukraine, you know, like should we say that what Putin is doing is wrong? I think we could.
Yeah,
And it's not we're not deluding ourselves in saying that either. Like, you know,
It's
he
referring
ought
to something real.
He ought not to do what he did.
Yes.
Right?
So
doesn't mean, like, as I was trying to say, like, I don't think that people know how to make prescriptive claims. Like, I'm not saying that prescriptive claims don't exist. I'm saying people don't know how, and I don't certainly know how. Like, I don't, like, cause I can just say that all the things I'm saying are just preferences of mine.
right.
There's no, I don't believe in objective morality.
Okay, so let's see how I think we can get there, because there are descriptions of what is. This is the whole is-ought conundrum. There are descriptions of what is. Within those descriptions are not prescriptions for what should be. That would be what ought to be, right?
Yes.
So how do you get from an is to an ought? It's the
That's the
word.
question.
It's the word if. It's putting an if-then statement in between. So if you value living, as I've given this example a few times now, if you value, like a person can starve themselves to death. That doesn't tell me anything about whether that was right or wrong, because that has nothing, like, you can only get it to the question of whether or not that was right or wrong if you talk about what, you know, something in between that defines it more. So if I, again, to go back to this example of, if I see a person sticking a knife into another person, you can't by that very action say whether it's right or wrong. But if we're talking about moral rules and objective rules, then if that person does not want to be cut, then that is the thing that's going to make it ought. I don't know if I'm describing it very well, but
Yeah, no, I think I kind of understand what you're saying, but I'll try to address Chris's criticism, because I think it's really fair, and I think it is really difficult, right? You know, so Chris, you're saying that it's hard for us to make any moral claims, you know, that are prescriptive. It's hard for us to always justify them. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like how do we do moral reasoning at all, right?
Yeah,
So-
I think it all happens on the field by which we act. I think that's where you should be targeting, rather than like from a theoretical lens of looking at it from an outside view. Like, do you think that you know, like you see a bad action and you say, oh, like, this action shouldn't be happening. Rather, it's how you act and how that comes from yourself. That's kind of the way that I.
right.
But it's still rooted in some kind of a psychology, like a preference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge I have, and I mentioned this a few times, is that okay? So our moral claims, murder is wrong, is an expression of what's right or wrong. It's not an expression of preference. So there's still an as-if lifestyle. But I think what you're saying, and I think this might be helpful, is like, how do we actually start looking at the world and thinking morally about it?
Yes.
And this is the challenge, because the religious view, okay, where do we ground? I can't look at the
Right.
world and just identify moral facts.
You're not going to find
Right?
them. Yeah.
So the religious view is that our moral sense is rooted in revelation. So God reveals to us what is right or wrong, right? So we do have a moral faculty, just like we have cognitive faculties like perception, thinking and judgment,
Mm-hmm.
observation, right? So we have these cognitive faculties. We also do have a moral faculty, right? Where just as when we perceive the world itself manifests itself to us.
Yeah.
Same is true with moral issues.
Yeah.
When we see a moral problem, the moral problem, it is still manifested to us. So we do have a moral capacity. At the end of the day, this is endowed or given to us by God.
Right.
So it's simply revealed to us, right?
Yeah.
And I know this.
No, but that's a believer making that claim.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with people.
Exactly. So
Which is
if
great.
If you're going to reject revelation,
Yeah.
then it's really difficult to make. And as a believer too, we believe in the Bible is God's word and that it's revealing something to us.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to what the world reveals to us, the Scripture is also revealing something to us, right? So the Christian worldview and the Christian moral worldview is a combination between what's revealed in Scripture, but also what's revealed in our day-to-day life.
Right.
Right, but the key concept is revelation, is simply given to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm going to draw on Plato here, or the distinction between modern philosophy and pagan philosophy. So, modern philosophy begins with skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with, okay, how do I know anything about the world whatsoever? All right, it starts with skepticism.
Yeah.
But when you read pre-modern philosophy like Plato doesn't start with that, right, in a sense, because Plato would start with, okay, what is philosophy? Oh, it's about learning what is the good life.
Right.
Right? So that's how you start thinking of philosophy. Well, what is the good life? And that assumes the good life is out there.
Right.
It assumes that we can grasp it. Right? So you're starting from a position where you essentially have faith in what the world is revealing to us,
Yeah.
what our moral inclinations are telling us. We assume that these are telling us the truth about something.
Right.
We don't start from a skeptic point of view. We don't start with skeptic. We don't start doubting what's revealed to us. We first embrace what's revealed to us.
Yeah.
Right? And let's use another example when it comes to moral claims. Okay, so if we had a toaster, like the toast bread,
Yeah.
and if aliens came by, say after a post-apocalypse, everybody's dead,
Mm-hmm.
and started poking around in our stuff, and they found a toaster,
Yeah.
right? Would it be reasonable for them to arrive somehow at the idea that this toaster has a purpose? It's for toasting bread or toasting something,
Yeah.
like for food,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think an alien could believe that this toaster, something about the toaster itself, our
Right.
description of the toaster,
Right.
exceeds what the materials is or what it's made out of. Like,
Yeah.
it's has a purpose,
Right.
right? So even from a religious view, we can start interpreting the world like, I don't want to be crude, but a man has a penis and a woman has a vagina. Don't tell my mom I go there.
How'd you find that out?
I don't think it's completely unreasonable
Mm-hmm.
to say, well, maybe they ought to go to each other.
Right.
Like, if God designed the world in a particular way, why not believe that these two things ought to? Why not believe that we ought to be procreating?
Well, okay, so there's an example of a man has a certain set of goods, and females have another set, and they go together. But you don't have to. They don't have to go together. But if you want to have a child, they have to go together.
Yeah, but
It's not it's not a subjective thing. That's how you get a child, is by bringing a sperm into an egg type thing. Like that's so I'm describing what is, but I'm also describing what ought to be if you have a goal. So if you have a goal,
goals transcend us.
goals transcend us.
And that's religious.
And I think a theist can make that argument, and I personally would agree with it, but I can see why atheists would disagree with it.
And what I would say is that they do transcend this, but they don't make a bridge to that thing that you're trying to transcend to.
That's
So this is the
fair. Yeah.
So I was able to formulate by criticism
Yeah.
that I had. So you mentioned, Dan, that you can't. So able to see a horrendous act, let's say someone killing someone else, and
Yeah.
say that's wrong.
Right.
But until you are put into a situation where you are in that situation, you have to make the decision to kill or not to kill.
Yeah.
Then that is where it really, really matters. And until then,
Okay.
you're just making an empty claim, saying
Right.
this is bad. But how about you? How have
Right.
you been in that situation?
Right.
So this is the thing that I have the criticism of, is that,
Yeah.
and of course it's been shown, this is so clear, moral philosophy is really pointless. It's super pointless. Why is it pointless? Well, they've done experiments taking moral philosophers versus regular people. They want to see if moral philosophers would be making better moral decisions, or they find that moral philosophers are making the exact same errors as normal people who don't even study moral philosophy.
Right.
Okay, so that's a really good point. That is a really good point. And this is related to the idea, like, do I believe that atheists could be just as moral as Christians? I do believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So then should we conclude that, oh, maybe moral thinking doesn't matter because, well, the Christian does moral things, the atheist does similar moral things. Like, how different is John and I? I don't know, we go to work and
Yeah.
we do this, and like our lives are not that different, yet I'm a Christian, he's not, right? My response would be, well, is because a lot of atheists piggyback on religious ideas without really fully
Yes.
knowing
Yes.
it.
That's
Or
that's
if
Jordan
it's-
Peterson's big argument, right?
But not only that, but I think where the differences lie at the level of policy,
Mhm.
right? Like, yeah, I think that's, if we're going to be looking for moral differences,
Yeah.
we're not. It's hard to think through specific moral problems at the personal level,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
But when we're
So-
articulating policy,
Yeah.
like, obviously there's huge differences between what Christians say about abortion and,
Yeah.
and what non-Christians.
That's where the rubber meets the road there, because you're talking about you're talking about something that's true, and I'm talking about something that's true, and I disagree with that. That moral philosophy is pointless, is because you have to have some foundation, because you're talking about how do you then live it out? How then do you live morality out? That's a great question, and that's a whole other topic and a whole other area that we should focus on, and in fact, what I do focus on sometimes, in my sermons and stuff. But not, like, it's a both and. It's not an either or. You have to have the foundation of moral philosophy, and then you can have the discussion about how do you live out that moral philosophy? How do you actually live it? If you don't have a foundation of moral philosophy, then you could have laws passed where, hey, do whatever you want, kill people, steal from people, But if you have moral rules, you can say, no, actually, those are wrong.
But when we're trying to understand the theory of why murder's wrong, this has been
Right.
the topic of the whole discussion.
Yeah.
But that's already obvious to us. We already know that murder's wrong. So in that sense, what are we trying to get at?
We're trying to express, like, it basically comes down to those people who do murder or do steal, upon what basis are they're living those lives? They're living their lives in such a way where they're denying or ignoring moral rules. It's like, well, you do that to your own peril. It might be fine in the moment, but you're going to eventually, like, what is a gangster who goes around killing people? They usually end up being killed themselves, right?
Yeah, so you're a moral relativist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I just want to, I mean, the only way that we can really know, for example, that murder is wrong is from our own perspective. Like, we can reference our own feelings about murder rather than say God or theory that we know murder is wrong because that's how we feel. But I mean, there are plenty of societies that don't completely feel that way. Won't talk about it here, but like, for example, Harari mentions some in his book *Sapiens*. You want to read that? Not the whole book's not about morality.
Okay.
Just a small part.
Yeah. Like, what would we do in a society, like, if you I guess we're talking about moving beyond the individual, and I don't mean moving beyond individuals, I mean beyond your own personal experience. How can we talk about moral prescriptions. Like, what does it mean to be a moral relativist? Like you said, you are one. What does that mean? That there aren't things that all people shouldn't do? You know?
Well, a moral relativist would go against the idea that there is universal values that hold up at every time and every place. So
Yeah.
you would go against your idea
Right.
that there are values that you hold up at every time and every place.
Yes.
So that's what moral relativism is saying, that you don't need to be, you know, you don't have, it's not needed that it has to hold up for, forever. It doesn't need to, it can be changing. In one context when you say murder is bad, in another context when you don't.
Sorry, just for my own understanding, what's an example of a context where murder is good?
Where murder is good when you have to save your family from someone who is trying to harm them.
Okay,
That
but
would be good because you are sustaining and
but-
preserving the relationships that you have with your family.
but you're saying it's good in reaction to the idea that murder is bad because they're trying to kill you.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not.
Well,
I don't think that I could prescribe. That's prescription.
Yeah.
So
Well, if a person tries to kill you, is that good or bad?
a person, I don't know if it's good or bad. I can't say it's good.
See, there are some things in life, lots of things are complicated. I grant that. Some things in life are super simple. And I just want to tell you, I think that this is really simple.
So, question,
If you don't want to die,
what
murder's bad.
what criteria do you use to evaluate if something is good or bad then?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. Say that again. What criteria?
Do you use to evaluate if something is good or bad?
Yeah. You said you don't know if something's good or bad, but do you ever evaluate something?
I don't think I have a criteria for distinguishing what is good and what is bad.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, yeah, Rebecca, yeah.
I just have a question. So, just from this perspective, like, if you looked at something that happened in the world, would you look at, like, for example, if you don't think murder is good or bad, what if you saw in the news that someone was murdered? What would you think?
Yeah.
Would you just not think anything? Or would you think, oh, might be good? Or is this bad? So that's just what I'm thinking. Because if you saw it, would it be good or bad? Because I think we all have this innate judgment of something. And so either we're going to decide if it's good or bad, but that would be our moral framework.
Right. And just to add to that, knowing full well that the person who was killed didn't want to be killed. They were literally saying, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, and then the person kills them.
Yeah.
Good or bad?
I would say it's bad. So it's
Okay.
it is a simple question.
Yeah,
Right? So
yeah.
I totally agree with you. You say it's bad.
Right.
But there is a but here. It's the fact that, this is why I said that people don't know, like, why or, like, how they make their prescriptive claims. Like, they don't understand why.
That's
like,
fair.
It seems so obvious. Like, I 100% agree that's terrible to see someone
Sure.
being killed. Right? It's awful.
Yeah.
But again, I was trying to say, until I'm ever put in that perspective, there was a great book, I forget what the name is, but it basically describes these ordinary people they're thrown into
Yes.
the Nazi regime, right?
Yes.
I forget what the name is.
I don't remember, but
Yeah, but basically
they did it.
And then it shows them
Yeah.
doing insane things that that they reflect on and say, I don't know how I did these things.
But that, again, is going back to the thing of people not being able to keep moral rules doesn't negate the reality of moral rules. So,
It should though, because they don't understand the basis on which they're making their moral rules. They don't understand the basis of good and evil or good and bad.
yeah, go ahead.
But they also later said, I don't know how I did these things. So they do know that there is an ultimate truth that murder is wrong.
Yeah.
But they still didn't follow it. So
Right.
it's still there.
There is, I mean, it's complicated because we're talking about either people have a moral sense or you're a psychopath and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do evil things, but you might not have the ability to have a moral sense. I'll give you a real world example. You know, a lot of people will experience abuse growing up from their parents. They were hit, they were abused, however you want to put it, right? And you will grow up with that, and you might have the inclination to hit your kids when they inevitably will, take your, test your patience. But I've been able to personally, even I was, spanked as a kid. And so sometimes when I lose my patience and I'm angry, I'll have like some little feeling inside of me of like, oh, it would just be so much easier just to, instead of reasoning with my 4-year-old, I could just spank them and try to deal with it that way. But I've come to, because of moral philosophy, I'd say it's always wrong to assault another person. And I would say especially children, because they don't have the means to defend themselves or anything like that. But it's always wrong to assault another person. So that moral philosophy, that foundation of a moral rule, is guiding me, even though it's sometimes a struggle inside myself. I have to stop myself from doing it, right? Because it would be easier, or it would be, however you want to put it, right? So that to me is both and. It's the moral philosophy is informing my experience, and then I have to make choices within, based upon that. I mean, how do you not see the truth of these moral rules? Like, as not just a subjective thing, but as things that, again, apply to everybody. Because baked within them are people's consent being violated. That's what makes it wrong, because then it no longer becomes a universal preference or value, right?
And so that's how injustices are justified.
Yes.
When people don't see other people as valuable,
Exactly.
as equals.
Exactly. Oh, that's
Things.
the whole notion of slavery, and yeah, that's
and
great.
even like abusive people, they know what they're doing is wrong, even though there's this part of them that propels them to
Yeah.
be abusive
Yeah.
from their own personal baggage
Right.
earlier in their life. But that's why they say, don't you tell anybody.
Yeah.
Or they only do it behind closed doors.
Right.
They know.
Yeah.
But there's a part of them that isn't strong enough to resist it.
Right.
So
Yeah, because
real
again,
it's a struggle, but which they have to deal with.
to Matthew's point, I think part of what you're trying to get at, and I agree with it, is that there is something inside of us that transcends us, that gives us that desire for conformity to these moral rules. Is that fair to say? Like that's what Paul talks about. Like the law is written on the heart, even of Gentiles, of non-Jews. Like naturally, there's something inside of us that's we have a moral sense.
Yeah, and just want to point out that a lot of times in philosophy, people like to think, oh, you first have to prove things. Like the idea of faith is kind of like nobody really believes in faith anymore. But during the Middle Ages, the whole idea of faith before faith-seeking understanding is that you first have faith in what the world or the universe or whatever God is revealing to you.
Right.
First have faith in it, and then you start articulating the reasons after.
Right.
It's very counter, like obviously it's counter to how we start doing philosophy now. We start with skepticism, right? But this older view makes a lot more sense. Like to our day, like it's so much more common sense.
Yeah.
Right. And right, because it explains why me, as somebody who's more informed about moral philosophy, and my mom could believe similar things about morality.
Right.
She doesn't do moral philosophy like I've done.
Exactly.
Right, but yet she's still able to make moral judgments
Right.
that are justified and right. Right. So this idea of faith-seeking understanding, the idea that the truth about the world, whether they're the truth in general, is revealed to us. It's given to us as a gift.
Yes.
It empowers everybody to start making moral claims,
Yes.
That's all. That's the only good thing. So we don't know what to do with technology because we don't. Our moral claims don't really reflect reality. But all it does is produce
Right.
science and technology.
Right.
And that's it. Which means the art's
Which-
out the window, humanity's out the window.
Okay.
All out the window.
I think it goes back to something I said at the very beginning, which is I'm describing the logic of morality, the mechanics of it to get to it for it to be objective. But that doesn't explain why a person would want to be moral or should be moral or why society should be moral. That's more based upon why you think morality exists in the first place. To what you're saying is it was revealed to us. And even an atheist could say, if they start thinking along those lines more so, they could say, we are each born within the context of a greater collective, right? Like, evolutionarily speaking, we're born into this, like, just one instance of this millions and billions of people, and we have what did Jung say, like a collective consciousness, right? Like, we're all sort of absorbing or have within us in our subconscious this foundation that we can't even begin to grasp, and it's baked into us. I keep using the word baked, but I think it makes sense. Like, it's in us, or a Christian would say it's the law of God on our hearts. Like, it's moral sense within us.
And one last thing I want to say, that even if evolution gave us this moral sense, it doesn't follow that excludes revelation.
That's right. That's right.
It could be the means by which the truth is
And I think that is
revealed to us.
a good Christian way to put it.
It's
Yeah.
always, any claim to truth, even claims of scientific truth, it's always still revelation.
Yeah.
All claims of truth are simultaneously an act of revelation and an act of science or whatever, any kind of inquiry you want. It's revelation through and through.
Yeah.
It's not like revelation is something here that's given to us, but over here, this is all natural scientific research.
I think
It's always revelation through and through.
there being a God, a morally perfect God, makes more sense out of our existence than there not being one. That's not a proof, right? Like, you can't prove that to somebody. But personally speaking, I think it makes more sense that the reason why all these things are inside of us is because they were put there at some point. But
It's
oh, well, was Chris gonna talk tonight? Did you have a topic? A video? Okay. How long is it? Okay. Do we want to do that next time?
I'm willing to watch it, but if other people don't want to watch it,
I want to watch it, but not tonight.
Yeah. Let's save it for next time if that's okay. Well, we can either just end and just keep talking if we want to. All right. Well, we'll end the night officially, and then yeah. All right. Thank you, God, for a great discussion. Again, we're approaching you, even with an understanding that we don't really fully grasp what you are, but that doesn't matter. We come to you knowing that there's something beyond us, something more than just our own experience, and we want to participate in that to whatever degree we can in our lives. So please help us and guide us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. I think that's the divide, Chris, is we're saying that there's our experience, which matters, but there's also something beyond us, which also matters. And you don't have to necessarily be a theist to believe that there's something beyond us, because we're talking about these abstract concepts. But it makes more sense if you do believe.
it's also interesting. So a lot of people might say, "Oh, well, how do you know that the Bible is revelation?" Well, from this way of thinking, we just assume it's revelation. We don't have to justify it, because to say to justify it would negate the idea of revelation, right?
Well-
so it's simply just given to us. This is it. This is what we believe, right? So we don't have to say, "Well, why the Bible?" Well,
But then you can make the claim that the Bible is, I would say, includes revelation because we have recognized that it was written by people. So
Yeah, it's both.
it's in there. It's both. Yeah, it's the revelation of God is within the Bible, but that doesn't mean the Bible is this easy to use book that we can just open it up wherever we are and say, oh, well, now we know everything. It's a guide to wisdom, I think, is what Scripture is a guide, a way to get to revelation.
Well, it is revelation.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a whole other topic.